All right, guys, today we're gonna focus on offshore for the most part. We're kind of in that late summer time period. Just gonna kind of give you a lay of the land of what we're looking at. Right now, we're just coming up to a little mid-lake hump, pretty small. You can already see the nice transition here. There is some rock, so we got lake bottom here, the mud, muck. Beautiful transition into the sand. And then we do have some boulders up there right on the edge, just a bit, not a crazy amount here, but there is enough that's gonna hold some fish. And you can actually see, it's kind of in the numbers here, but there's bluegill beds up there. We can actually still see that even though we're late in the summer. Those bluegills will still spawn on the full moons throughout the summertime. And that's a really good indicator that the bait fish are living in this area too. So there transitions back into the mud bottom there, but that's what we're looking for. That's what we want to key on. You know, there's a series of baits that we can use for this stuff. I like to start with more of a reaction style bait to begin with. Crankbaits and, you know, deep jerk baits. You might throw a big hair jig on it. Today we're going to try and catch them cranking, and then we might have to progress into some other stuff, but we'll kind of see how it goes. But that gives you a lay of the land. We've got several spots on this lake. This lake has a bunch of little points, humps around these deep basin areas. And as we get into the late summer, those are really the key areas that you want to be focusing on for these offshore fish. Humps, points, near deep water basins is really what I like. We've got a few more down here in this area that we'll eventually try. You know, you can see the deep basin here and a couple main lake points. So we'll get up on the troller, get our 360 and live fired up so we can get the right casting angle and see what we can find. We're gonna start with this is a DT16. You know, the beauty of the Rapala DT lineup is we got crankbaits to cover all depths. DT10s, 14s, 16s, 20s. And really you want to choose one that's going to allow you to get down and grind bottom a bit. So this hump tops out at, I'd say 13, 14 feet, and then it drops off down into 20. So, you know, a DT16 or a DT20 is really going to do the job well for us. And really, you know, before I make a cast, I want to get my lineup and kind of get my bearings here. And using 360 and live is a really good way to do that. We can already see a bit of the transition into the sand coming up there, and then we can use live to see it coming up too. And on these spots, you know, you may get fortunate and pick the right angle. And what I mean by that is the right casting angle right away. But sometimes you got to maneuver around these and throw at it from different angles to see which one gets these fish to fire the best. And sometimes, on some days, none of the angles work. But usually there's an angle that works the best. And once you find that, you kind of want to hone in on that and try and make that same cast over and over again. Here's one, I think. There's a decent largemouth. To start, had to switch to the hedgehog and Carolina rig to get that one to go. We started off cranking on this spot, but I didn't want to eat the crankbait yet. Decent little largie. We kind of circled back right where we were throwing that crankbait, and they just don't want to eat a crankbait at times, and might just be time of day. You know, you circle back through these at different times of the day and they might fire on that. But it's always good to have a bit of a progression of baits when you're offshore like this. We're just dragging this ever so slowly. You can see we're getting hung on rock every so often. Kind of just barely twitching it through there. There's some bluegill bites there. It's always a good sign. Tells you there's some bait in the area. Probably near those bluegill beds that we scanned as well. on that spot again. Nice largemouth. All right, there we go. There's a chunky one. They're just being a little finicky this morning, having to slow way down. A little 3/0 VMC red line, and that's a beautiful fish. Right on that little gravel patch, put those bluegills down there. Get ourselves another hedgehog here. We're just throwing a simple Carolina rig, probably, I'd say a 3-foot leader, 4-foot leader, 3/4 ounce weight on there. You know that school's down there and we're here somewhat early morning. There might just not be fired up yet. Carolina rig's a really good slow presentation that you can pull through these fish. You know, anytime they're offshore, you know, whether that's springtime pre-spawn, springtime post-spawn, summer, early fall. He ate it. Got it on the underside. Always good to be updating those trebles, swapping them out for good quality ones. Little chunky bass. Decent largemouth. It's a healthy largie on the C-rig again. Just paralleling that rock edge. Feels like a good one on the Carolina. Sometimes they feel so big on this thing with that weight. Fun size largie. Pass on a crankbait. Decent little one on the DT16. And we got them fired up. We changed angles a bit. We were throwing at that angle, kind of moved to the other side. And that one ate it. There's one. That's a decent chunk. All right. Had to break out the drop shot. Little janitor in the mouth there. Finesse Nico, really good largemouth drop shot hook. We're just Texas rigging this. We threw the crankbait down there, the C-rig, now we just got a little straight tail worm. Crush City Janitor, this is a green pumpkin color. This is an awesome little Nico and drop shot worm. If you got any sort of grass down there, it's gonna come through it really well. There's one. First cast on a new area. On the DT20. DT20 fit the bill there. There we go. Came at it from a different angle. Got T-boned it. All right. Good chunky fish on the DT20. Switched up our angle a bit. And that one wanted to play, so we'll spot lock here and make that same cast. Another one on the drop shot. Found a couple with the DT20 here and a little cleanup with the drop shot and the janitor. You know, these offshore rock spines, rock piles, humps, points, traditionally those warmer days, the moving bite gets better later into the day, midday, mid-afternoon. I don't know what it is, if it's the sun that congregates them and they kind of get fired up easier based on a hard bait, crankbait like that. You know, today we started in the first half of the day really expecting to get some bites on a crankbait, and we've had to slow down. There's one on a C-rig. We've got some on a crankbait, but the C-rig and drop shot has definitely been better for numbers today. And it's another decent one. Yeah, all right. fun size. It's a good school down there. You know, we picked a couple off with that crankbait right away. I guess what I'm getting at is every day is a little different, and keep that in mind as you approach the day, and have your fast moving baits and slow cleanup baits ready to go, because one day they might fire on a crankbait the whole time you're there. Other days they might not touch it, and you gotta slow down, drag some plastics through there. All right, guys, we just had a pretty productive day offshore fishing, rotated through a bunch of different baits. Just gonna quick dive into each setup and what I was using for bait and tackle and line and whatnot. The drop shot was really a key deal for us to really clean up on those schools. So we had caught some on the crankbait and sea rig. The drop shot was really key to get a couple extra bites. Just a simple straight tail worm here on a 1/0 drop shot hook. It's got a little keeper up there that allows us to Texas rig it. 1/4 ounce weight. This is 10-pound fluorocarbon. You can use 10, 12 is kind of what I recommend with these bigger drop shot worms. 10-pound braid, and then a 7-foot medium spinning rod. Pretty simple, pretty versatile setup. That was kind of our cleanup deal. The Carolina rig was really kind of a power finesse deal, you might say. So this is heavier line, a little bit bigger bait. You can move it a little bit quicker down there. So this was second in our rotation. Bigger line, 17 to 20 pound fluorocarbon. We had a 1/4 ounce weight here up top with a bead and a swivel. About a 3 to 4 foot leader, and then this is just a nice little creature bait. Floats really nice back there, weightless on the end of a Carolina rig, 3/0 worm hook there. And this is a 7'5" medium heavy. Reason for the longer rod, with that sea rig, it's more of a big sweeping hook set in deep water. So that longer rod allows you to pick up more line and get a really good hook into those fish. So I like a 7'4" to a 7'6" medium heavy rod when I am throwing that Carolina rig. All right, lastly, our crankbait setup. We kind of talked about it a little bit, but this is what we were starting on when we first found those groups. We had a 14, a 16, and a 20-foot diver. Different depths because each of those points and humps were in different depth ranges. So nice to have options there. You can pick up the right bait given the spot. Pretty similar setups, 12-pound fluorocarbon on all these. I do use a little bit bigger rod with the 16 and the 20-foot diver. These are 710 rods, full cork handle. With this 14-footer, it's a 7'4". You could probably throw the 14 on these bigger rods too. So these are glass and carbon mixed rods, which is great for throwing a crankbait with treble hooks. You get a good parabolic bend, but that bit of carbon allows you a little bit more sensitivity when you're grinding on bottom. When you've hit bottom, and you can kind of slow your retrieve a bit and really grind it in there. So those were our 3 deals today. That was our program. Crankbait, pick off those aggressive fish, and then drag the Carolina rig or the drop shot to clean up on those schools and maximize our bites.